A cave's entrance outside, time flows. Empires rise and fall. Inside, nothing moves. As the iron fist of the Roman Empire is about to close in on young people who refuse to bow for their beliefs, 7 youths and a dog take refuge in the darkness. But this is no ordinary escape. This is an escape against time itself. They fall asleep, not for days, not for years, but for centuries. When they awaken, the world is no longer recognizable. But did something like this really happen? Or is this story one of humanity's oldest and most powerful fictions? Ashab, al-Kahf, the 7 sleepers. This narrative appears in both the Quran and Christian texts. For some, it is a divine miracle. For others, a powerful allegory written to sustain faith. But here's the intriguing part. Despite such a monumental event, there isn't a single line about it in Roman records. No official document, no historian's note. Not the slightest trace in the archives of the time. The story first emerges about 200 years after the alleged event, in a poetic text written by a Syriac cleric. From there, it spreads from tongue to tongue, culture to culture, eventually becoming a sacred narrative. But this isn't just a religious matter. The same long sleep motif appears in ancient Greece, Japan, India, and European mythologies as well. Different geographies, different names, but almost the same story. What's more, modern science doesn't completely close the door on this narrative. Slowing metabolism, artificial hibernation, the relative flow of time. Things that once seemed like miracles are now being discussed in laboratories. So the real question is this: was Ashab al-Kahf a real event lost in the darkness of history? Or was it a symbolic reflection of humanity's desire to defy time? In this video, we will try to unravel the legend of the 7 sleepers, not through belief, nor through blind denial, but at the intersection of history, mythology, and science. And as always, we'll leave the decision to you. When we draw back the curtain of the story, we find ourselves in the mid-3rd century AD. During the reign of Emperor Decius, the Roman Empire sought to control not only its territories, but also the beliefs of its people. Everyone was required to offer sacrifices to the Roman gods and acknowledge the divine authority of the emperor. For those who refused, this was an era that meant exile, torture, and death. It is precisely within this atmosphere of oppression that the young men at the center of the Ashab al-Kahf narrative emerge. According to the tradition, these youths came from noble families, refused to abandon their faith, and chose a cave as their path of escape. With them was a loyal dog. At this point, the story feels familiar. Innocent people fleeing persecution is a common motif found in nearly all sacred narratives. However, this is where the first crack appears. Why does such a major religious act of defiance, followed by an extraordinary event, leave no trace in Rome's meticulous record-keeping system? There is not a single line about these youths in the edicts of Decius, in the writings of contemporary historians, or in official archives. The story first appears roughly 2 centuries later, in AD 521, in a poetic text called Mimru, written by Jacob of Seruch. This strengthens the possibility that the narrative may be less a historical report and more a literary work intended to reinforce faith. Over time, the story spreads within Christianity and later enters Islamic tradition. The account found in the Quran, in Surah al-Kahf, adopts a strikingly distinctive style. The exact number of the youths is not specified. How long they remained in the cave is not clearly stated. Even the phrase, "they stayed for 300 years," and added 9 points, not to certainty, but to ambiguity. The Quran characterizes debates over such details as guessing at the unseen, and shifts the focus away from numbers toward the underlying message. But this approach has not been accepted by everyone throughout history. Within Islamic intellectual history, figures such as Ibn al-Rawandi, Abu Bakr al-Razi, and Ibn Rushd argued that such stories could be symbolic or products of oral tradition. In their view, what is being conveyed is not history, but moral teaching. These perspectives, however, were often branded as heretical. Works were burned, names were silenced. Thus the story became not only sacred, but untouchable. What is striking is that the Ashab al-Kahf narrative is not alone. In ancient Greece, Epimenides sleeps in a cave and awakens 57 years later. In Japan, the fisherman Urashima Taro believes he has spent only a few days in an undersea palace, only to learn that 300 years have passed on Earth. In the Indian epic Mahabharata, 6 brothers and a dog journey toward the sacred Mount Meru. In British legends, King Arthur and his knights are placed into a deep sleep until the day they are needed again. Different cultures, different names, but the same idea, the suspension of time. At this point, the narrative builds a bridge from mythology to science. Today, medicine can significantly slow the human body's metabolism through therapeutic hypothermia. Heart rate drops, cellular activity is reduced to a minimum. NASA, meanwhile, is conducting research on synthetic torpor, aiming to place humans into a form of long-term hibernation for missions such as travel to Mars. And then there is the question of time itself. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not absolute. As speed increases or as one approaches massive gravitational fields, time flows more slowly compared to the outside world. Theoretically, a few days in one place could correspond to centuries in another. Of course, there is no evidence that a cave could produce such an effect. But the idea helps explain why the legend is so powerful. The story of Ashab al-Kahf may be one of humanity's oldest reflections of its desire to bargain with time, escaping death, seeking refuge from oppression, and awakening in the future. This is precisely what has kept the story alive across the ages. And for this very reason, the issue ceases to be merely a question of whether it is real or not. Because the true conflict does not take place inside the cave. It unfolds within the human mind that looks upon it. When we reach the end of the Ashab al-Kahf narrative, there is no single answer left behind. On the contrary, 2 separate doors open before us, and which one we choose to walk through is directly related to what we want to believe. The first door is the door of faith. From this perspective, the 7 sleepers are a manifestation of divine will's absolute dominion over time. The cave is not an ordinary shelter, but a sacred space where the laws of nature are suspended. The youths gave up everything for the sake of their faith and were protected by God. The ambiguities in the Quran are not a flaw, but a deliberate choice, because what matters is not how many they were or how many years they slept, but their stance against oppression and their willingness to pay the price. The second door is the door of history and the human mind. From this perspective, Ashab al-Kahf is not so much a lived event as it is a powerful narrative born in times of oppression. Roman persecution is real, but the centuries-long sleep in the cave is a product of mythology, symbolism, and the collective imagination. The story was carried through oral tradition, enriched with motifs from different geographies, and gradually sanctified. In this sense, Ashab al-Kahf can also be read as one of the earliest examples of science fiction in human history. What is striking is this: no matter which door you enter, the place you arrive at is the same question. Why does humanity want to stop time? Why do we dream of waking up to a more just world? Perhaps Ashab al-Kahf is not the story of sleeping youths, but of societies waiting to awaken. It is the symbol of those who refuse to remain silent in the face of tyranny, who are willing to pay a price, and who leave hope for the future. That is why the story is claimed in Ephesus, in Tarsus, and in Jordan alike. Because the narrative belongs not to a place, but to a need. Today, science discusses slowing down metabolism. Physics tells us that time can be bent. But no theory can suspend a human being's desire for justice. And that is exactly where the true power of Ashab al-Kahf lies. Did 7 youths really sleep in that cave? We do not know. Perhaps that is not the real question. The real question is this: are we awake today? The decision is yours.